today.
Nationality and Borders Bill, as amended in Public Bill Committee, to be considered.
Now.
We begin with new clause 2, with which it will be convenient to consider the other selected new clauses and amendments as listed on the selection paper. I call Henry Smith to move new clause 2.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that new clause 2 that stands in my name and the name of many honourable and right honourable members across this House be read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chagos Islanders have suffered over half a century of consistent injustices. They were forcibly exiled from their homeland, the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, outer islands like Perez Panos, by the Harold Wilson administration in the late 1960s to make way for a military base, and they were typically relocated against their will in Mauritius, but also in the Seychelles and some other locations as well. There are many aspects of the injustices suffered by the Chagos Islanders that I and many other honourable and right honourable members across the House have campaigned on, such as a right of resettlement, a right of compensation, a package which still hasn't been fully realised to any extent at all, also a right of self-determination. The fact that it's London or Washington or the UN in New York or Port Louis that is seeking to decide their future sovereign status. But there is another injustice that has been suffered by descendants of Chagos Islanders, and that is the denial of their moral right to British Overseas Territory citizenship. It is no fault of grandchildren and other descendants of the Chagos Islanders that their forebears were forcibly removed from their homeland and essentially dumped in other parts of the Indian Ocean. And it has meant that they have lost their right to British Overseas Territory citizenship. Had those individuals been born in other overseas territories, Gibraltar, the Falkland Islands, Bermuda, any of the others that exist, then they would have a right to British Overseas Territory citizenship. This is causing great hardship for many families and dividing many communities as a result. Those who were born on the Chagos Islands, those who are the direct children of those born on the Chagos Islanders, do have a right to British Overseas Territory citizenship and therefore British citizenship and are able to settle in this country and are productive members of our wider society, many of them having decided to live, I'm grateful, in my Crawley constituency. But for many grandchildren and other descendants of those islanders, it means that technically they are seen as foreign nationals and either have to go through an expensive and rigorous visa process to be here and then apply for indefinite leave to remain. And what that results in is families with different nationality status and immigration status, often in the same household, some able to work and access public funds and public services, others unable to, which creates issues in terms of housing overcrowding. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a community that has suffered a series of injustices, the sort of thing you'd expect to read in the history books of colonialism of several hundred years ago. We're not talking about many people either. We have just heard a lot about 20,000 Afghans evacuated from that country with the fall of Kabul. We've heard a lot about BNO citizens in Hong Kong with a right, over 3 million, with a potential right to settle in this country as a result of the increasing Chinese erosion of democracy there. In terms of Chagos Islanders, we are only talking about the hundreds to the low thousands who would be eligible. happy to give way.
Grateful to the honourable member for giving way, because he's absolutely right. It's not about the numbers, but it's about the principle, and it's about living up to our historic obligations. Can I tell the honourable gentleman I've seen a number of initiatives of this sort. I'll be happy to support his clause today. It remains to be seen what the response will be from the Treasury bench. But would he join me in putting the message across to those ministers and officials responsible here that this is not something that is ever just going to go away? If it's not today, then sooner or later the injustices here are going to have to be addressed.
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his support and his intervention, and I agree with every word he says. We have had over half a century of appalling injustice in many different areas for this community. It is time now that this House rights the wrongs that they have suffered, and in allowing British Overseas Territory citizenship for those descendants of the Chagos Islands, we can go a long way to do that. Chagos Islanders were forcibly removed from their homeland, not by this House, but by an order in Council. It has never been an issue that has had the proper scrutiny of this elected House. This elected House can now play its part in righting a significant historic injustice that has existed, and therefore I call upon members from across the House to support this new clause 2.
Acquisition by registration, descendants of those born on British Indian Ocean Territory.